For much of recorded history, thinkers have attempted to understand the causes of conflict amongst the human family. As part of this desire to understand, scholars have developed theories. Theories are a framework used to simplify phenomena. They are a plausible explanation of why something has occurred and a logical reasoning process to justify why that something might happen again. As China rises to the status of an economic and military peer competitor of the United States, interested parties turn their attention to the theories and frameworks that guide foreign policy amongst the world's states. Realism is one of the primary theories in the discipline of international relations. It is perhaps the oldest conceptual idea in the IR space. Realism views the world as anarchic, which means there is an absence of a supreme authority. Because of this absence of supreme authority, realists argue that states must provide for their own security. As a result, realists believe that conflict is inevitable, that it is an outcome of states competing for power and security in an anarchic world. Anarchy in this instance does not mean chaos. It just means there is no higher authority than the state who can enforce rules or maintain order. Because there is no world police force, realists believe that states seek to increase their power to protect themselves and to get what they want from within the international system. This is the first assumption of realist narratives. This concept is often summed up in IR textbooks by a quote from Thucydides, who, after observing the Greek conquest of Melios, stated, "The strong do what they wish, the weak suffer what they must." The second assumption within realism is that states are the main actors in the anarchic world that we all exist in. Realists believe that anarchy fosters insecurity, and for that reason, governments form to offer their people protection from this insecure international system. Of course, other players in the system, like private corporations, religious institutions, and non-state international organizations, play a role in shaping the international order. However, they are secondary to the state. It is the state that commands center stage, and in so doing, it competes with other states. The third assumption of realism argues that states are rational, that they undertake actions to benefit themselves, and that states can and do adjust their behavior when the cost of a certain action exceeds its benefit. This assumption of realism is often challenged because one does not have to look far to see an example of a state pursuing a course of action where the cost far exceeds the benefit. Realists are often challenged to explain such irrational behavior by various states. Nevertheless, realists maintain the premise that states are rational and that states will continue to pursue actions that benefit themselves, sometimes at the expense of other states. The fourth assumption of the realist paradigm is that security is the central problem of international politics. Of course, states want to create open trading systems and exist in a cooperative manner. However, as has been demonstrated during the world wars of the last century, those aspirations go out the window very quickly when conflict is present. The focus of the state at such times shifts immediately to survival. Realists argue that when the bare essentials of international relations are revealed, as they are during war, those bare essentials are all about power and survival. Finally, realists argue that the pursuit of security is competitive in nature. That means that there are winners and there are losers. Realists believe that the wealthier the state is, the more secure it will be. Because of this logic, realists expect competition. They see it as a natural byproduct of the international system. Realists acknowledge that peace and cooperation can, of course, be achieved. However, they argue it is temporary and not a permanent ongoing condition. Realists believe that states are always looking out for themselves and that states will exploit opportunities to gain an advantage. Realists suggest that this is perhaps where peace and cooperation ideals will inevitably be strained and the point where conflict might ensue as a result. Balance of power is a fundamental proposition in realist narratives. The concept, put simply, is that power is used to balance power. History appears to suggest that when states are threatened by another state, they will attempt to generate their own power through the acquisition of military capability. The justification being that they are then less likely to be attacked. The state that feels threatened can offset the power of a potential adversary by generating its own power. Through the pursuit of its own power acquisition, it rebalances the power dynamics within its region. States also form coalitions or alliances for the same reason. Examples of this phenomena can be observed right throughout recorded history and have been particularly pertinent over the last few centuries. The response of the European nations to Napoleonic France, the formation of NATO, and more recently the creation of the Quad alliance between the USA, Australia, India, and Japan are all examples of balancing coalitions and alliances being formed to aggregate the power of a perceived threat. Because the international system is anarchic, states can never really be sure of the intention of other states. This is often the catalyst for what realists call the security dilemma. A security dilemma is created when a state takes proactive steps to maintain its security, usually by acquiring military hardware. Even though the state's intention was one of defensive security as opposed to offensive conquest, neighboring states often view the activity as offensive in nature nonetheless. The neighboring state then takes its own action to ensure its own security. Both states just want to make sure that they can protect themselves, but in so doing, they trigger an arms race, leaving both states less secure than they previously were. Deterrence is another significant concept in realist paradigms. Deterrence refers to an idea of maintaining peace through fear. States seek to have the power that if they were attacked, they could retaliate on a level that would make it irrational for the prospective attacker to even engage in such an action in the first place. States seek to deter aggression by having the power to inflict severe consequences on any would-be attacker. If states are rational actors, as realist assumptions presume, then no rational state will attack another state if the consequences are likely to be too severe. Deterrence is the cornerstone of MAD doctrine. MAD stands for mutually assured destruction. MAD is a hypothesis that argues that nuclear war is unlikely to happen between states because no state can be certain of neutralizing the other state's nuclear weapons in one strike. That means the attacked state would inevitably respond with their own nuclear strike. If that happened, then both states could be assured of mutual destruction. MAD doctrine has been foundational in multiple states adopting nuclear triad frameworks. That is, some states who have nuclear weapons capability divide that ability into multiple spheres. They put their weapons in submarines, in land-based silos, and they maintain the traditional strategic bombing aircraft. It would be impossible for a state's adversary to take out all elements of a nuclear triad in one strike. Even if one submarine survived such an attack, that submarine could retaliate with devastating effect. It is argued that the fear of mutually assured destruction is the deterrent that has prevented nuclear wars from erupting between states who possess this technology. States also care about what IR scholars call relative gains. These are different to absolute gains. For example, many American foreign policy experts point out that by trading with China, both the United States and China have enjoyed absolute gains in the economic sense. However, the relative gains have been vastly more significant for China than for the United States. The US was the largest economy, the most powerful military, and the global hegemon in a unipolar world before it ushered China into the international order. After a couple of decades of China participating in international markets and institutions, China is now a peer competitor of the United States both economically and militarily. The United States is no longer the global hegemon, and the world is not in a unipolarity. By inviting China into the international order, the United States increased its wealth, but so too did China, and at greater levels. China had more relative gains from that interaction. Relative gains are an important reference point for understanding the actions that states take in the anarchic international system. Realists also have a keen awareness of the problems that have traditionally arisen as a result of what are called power transitions. Throughout history, states have risen and many have fallen. A common feature in this equation is that when a rising state comes to equal or surpass an existing powerful state, then conflict is very possible. The international relations scholar and Harvard professor Graham Allison calls this situation a Thucydides trap. Allison came up with this term based on a quote by Athenian historian and military general Thucydides, who suggested that the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta had been inevitable because of Spartan fears about the growth of Athenian power. Allison also went on to categorize 16 subsequent examples of times when a rising power reached a point of rivaling an existing power. Allison demonstrated that 12 of those 16 occasions ended in war. Perhaps this is why realists place significant emphasis on studying and understanding the antecedents of power transitions. Realism is traditionally contrasted by liberalism. Liberalism is perhaps less pessimistic than realism, and it places a greater emphasis on cooperation between states as opposed to conflict. In the next video in this series, we will look at the China dilemma through the lens of liberalism.